What do we have here then? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's an Elpico AC-88 and it's the original version and it's in absolutely super condition. There's no marks or anything on the casing. Little tiny dent here. If I just move the camera around, you can see a little dent there. But no, the front of it looks really nice. The old name badge there has been bent slightly. It's possible that could be straightened a little, but on the front of it, I mean, it looks absolutely immaculate. If we look top down, again, you can see the casing is absolutely immaculate. I mean, I don't think it's been repainted. I mean, it might have been. I have no idea, but if it has, it's been done very well. The handle's not original, but you know, that doesn't really matter. In fact, I can see a little bit of paint on the edge there, so this might well have been repainted. And if we look at the side, you can see again it's in very good condition. If we look at the serial number, we can see it's 127441. And if I look at my own amp, which is next to it, is 127569. So it's only 120 apart on the production run between my amp and this other amplifier. However, if we look at the backs of them, you can see my one has got some rubbing on the paint where it's come off, whereas this one is absolutely spotless. Now there's one thing missing on this amp, and that is the metal surround on the edging. As you can see, there's actually nothing here at all. Whereas if we look at mine, there's this metal edging, but really that doesn't really make a lot of difference. Certainly doesn't affect the tone, no matter what somebody on Reverb would tell you. Okay, I've got the chassis out of the case now, and I'm just having a little look at things. Firstly, we'll look at the valve bases. And as you can probably tell, these valve bases are all original. They are exactly as they were when they were put in. They were riveted in. They've never been changed, never been replaced. If we look at the tone stack, all those components there are original. And here we've got our volume controls and our inputs. Interestingly, it looks like these wires are fairly new. They've been added at some point. If we look at our inputs and our volume controls, these first two inputs are mic level inputs, and the third input is a gram input, and the input jack goes directly to the volume control because it has one less stage of gain than the mic inputs have. The way this amp works is, on the mic inputs you've got signal coming in, that feeds one of the valves, the output of that valve then goes into the volume control, that then goes to a mixing point which is done through these resistors here. The second input again goes to one side of the input valve. That then comes out, goes to the volume control, goes into the next input stage, and then it's all mixed together on the next input stage, along with the output of the gram input. That's then fed into the next valve. That then goes into the phase splitting, which is done on another valve, because these are all CC83, so they're like two valves in one really. That then gets fed into the output valves here. That then goes into the output transformer, and that goes to the speakers. This is the interesting bit. This is the undercarriage of the amplifier, and straight away I can see quite a bit of work has been done. If we look here, we can see that these are coupling capacitors that have been replaced. These are electrolytics that have been replaced there. Here, all these resistors have been replaced. That one's a new resistor. I think that's a new resistor. These capacitors have all been replaced. And here, this capacitor looks to be non-original. That wire round resistor is original. That's an original resistor. Interestingly, this capacitor here is in place, and I'm guessing that's probably has been replaced. We'll find out when we power it up and listen to it and see if it hums or not. If we look at our mains cable here, it's just been tied on with a knot in there, which isn't particularly good, although that's how these amps were built. And if you were to pull that really tightly, it would break the live going to the power switch. So what I will do is, in here I will add some cable ties so that this can't be pulled out. Otherwise the amp looks in pretty good shape. Having flicked it back round again, this electrolytic capacitor here is definitely original because it's still riveted to the case as it was when it was made in 1963. And this one here as well, that one's also been riveted. We also have the original fuse holder. Now, there is something I do not like at all. If we look at the fuse holder, this side of the fuse holder is almost touching, would almost be touching the casing of the amplifier. That is really not good at all. And there are several ways that we can deal with that. And what I should probably do is I'll bend that up like that, but then I'm going to put heat shrink all around it so that there's no way that can touch any part of the casing. I don't like these fuses anyway. On my amp, I actually replaced it with the fuse in the IEC socket that I mounted. But because this isn't my amp and I'm not actually doing any work on it, I will just heat shrink that live wire and cover it over so there's no way that's going to be touching the case. The actual fuse mounting is actually insulated from the amp, but again, I will visually inspect that a bit closer, and I will be doing a proper PAT safety test on this amp to make sure that there is no leakage between the fuse holder and the casing. Well, since the last segment, I've been for a swim at Tinside Lido, which, if you don't know that, it's a jewel in Plymouth's crown. It's a big open air saltwater swimming pool, and on a hot day like this, it was a really cool thing to do. Anyway, getting back to the amp, I've rewired the fuse holder to have heat shrink wrapped around it, so right now that's not going to touch anything, so I'm pleased with that. And I've popped all the valves in. These are the valves that came with the amp, and I've no reason for any of them not to work. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop it all back together, and I'm then going to do a safety test. I'm then going to plug it into a cab and we'll see how it sounds. Okay, let's give this a test then. Yep, it's passed its safety test, that's good. Well, here's the sound demo then. So I've got the AC-88, it's plugged into this cab, which is the cab I normally use with my AC-88, and the speaker inside is a Celestion Greenback from the mid-70s. It's mic'd up to a Shure SM58, which you can just about see there, and that's plugged directly into my camera. So I'm going to switch the amp on, and we'll just wait for it to warm up. Gotta say, it just looks in really beautiful condition, and you know, there's one of the silver bits is missing off that knob, but other than that, it looks great, and I can hear it warming up now, and it's humming. That's not good. Second go, you heard some hum there. One of the input valves was a bit loose in its base, so I've just given it a little twist and it's fine now. That is the same fault I had with my original AC-88, in that I had to replace all the valve bases. So with this amp, I would say this needs all its valve bases replacing as well. It takes a while, it's a faff, but it's well worth doing. Anyway, with the guitar plugged in, I'll just give it a bit of treble. So yeah, it's got a good little clean tone. It's roughly, it's not as loud as mine, and I think a lot of that is probably due to the fact that the valves are older and it probably needs those power supply capacitors changing, because it is humming. So it is humming a bit, and you know, that's not so good. So it definitely needs some capacitor work going, but all the inputs work. If I go into input 2 and I turn it up to about the same level, that channel's actually a bit louder. So and again, you know, I don't know how old the valves are in it. They could be, you know, they're probably from the 60s, so they probably are losing a bit of level, bit of volume, bit of punch. Because in my Elpico, I've got brand new valves in. You know, I don't go along with this, oh, you've got to have really old valves, it makes it sound better. I don't believe any of that nonsense. I think new valves will work better. If we go into the third input, now I'm going to turn the knob to roughly the same position. But of course it's a lot quieter, and that's because it's a line level input. So as I said earlier, it's got one less stage of gain, but you can still turn it up. If I turn it up to full, that's probably maxed out my camera there, so it might have distorted, but you know, that has that Elpico sound to it. But I'll go back into the main input. I mean, so yeah, it's working fine, but it needs some more work doing. It definitely needs the power supply sorting out, and I guess whoever worked on this didn't have those big CAN capacitors to swap over. But when I did mine, I didn't use those capacitors at all. I just fitted in a couple of tag boards, and then I just used some modern, good quality electrolytic capacitors and just replaced them. And if that's done to this amp, then that hum will go. But then the main thing is those valve bases will need replacing. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm about to take the valves out of this amp, let it cool down, take the valves out, pack it back up and send it back to its owner, knowing that, you know, it works, and at some point maybe the owner will think to get the thing fully overhauled. But if not, if you like an amp that's as authentic and as original as possible, and certainly if you crank it up, you're not going to hear that hum anyway. And I had a friend's amp here the other day, an old Ampeg, and that hummed 10 times worse than this, and he gigs with that amp all the time. So, you know, amps hum, but like I say, great amps. I love Elpico AC-88s. They really are fantastic pieces of kit, and this one's in beautiful condition. And you know, it's 59 years old. And saying this one and my one, they're only 120 apart from each other in the production run. And I cannot see any reason why this amp will not run for another 50, 60 years. The only things really that could fail long term might be the transformers, but like a lot of these things, you know, if they haven't been used for years, then they've got more life in them. Well, that's what I like to think anyway. Anyway, thanks for watching the video, and I'll catch you on the next one.